In this Blender materials tutorial, I will show you two ways to begin texture painting in Blender and Krita. This is an update to an older tutorial. I provided a link to the Blender file in the description if you want to follow along. The keys I'm using are in the bottom right corner of the viewport. Hand painting completely within Blender is possible. When I select the rock and go into Texture Paint Workspace, the rock has a pinkish purple color, which indicates that there's no material. I add a material by opening the Active Tool tab and add a dark gray base color texture. If I split the left-hand viewport into two areas and open the shader editor, I can now see my shader nodes. If I then change the name of the material, it will update on the image texture node. I use hotkeys and shortcuts a lot, so I can hold down the F key and move my mouse or pen to change the radius of the brush. Holding down the Shift and F keys and moving the mouse or pen changes the strength of the brush. Blender comes with 6 brush options. The Draw brush allows you to draw on the 3D object or on the UV map. The Soften brush is used to soften or sharpen the image. The Smear brush blends the color in the direction of the mouse or pen movement. This is similar to a smudge brush in GIMP or Photoshop. The Clone brush copies the image from a specified location to the active location. I can use Ctrl left click to select a color, and then use my mouse or pen to clone that color to a different part of the object. The Fill brush is used to fill large areas of the image. The Mask brush maps an image onto the mesh, and this is beyond the scope of this introductory tutorial, so I'll make this as a standalone tutorial. I can use various blend modes for the brushes, similar to Krita or Photoshop. I can also save my colors to a palette for use later. I'm going to start by dabbing various colors onto the rock to break up the overall color, saving each color to my palette. I'll add a cloud's texture to use as my brush. I open the texture panel and click on New and name the texture. I open the Clouds texture on the Texture tab and adjust my setting back on the Brush tab. I'll change my strength and radius as I paint so I can vary the strokes and not end up with a bunch of uniformity. As I continue to paint, I'll change my blend modes as well. If I want to only paint on certain faces, I can go back to edit mode and select the faces. Back in texture paint mode, I activate the paint mask. This means I'll only paint on the selected faces. When I'm done working on the mask, I can deactivate it and continue working. Once I'm done, I will turn up the roughness and save the UV. This will be my diffuse or albedo map. While hand painting is possible in Blender, it does have limited brushes and can be a bit complicated to use. If you want to use an external editor, you'll need to set up your external application in Blender's preferences. In Preferences, under the File Paths panel, find your image editor of choice using the folder icon, and then save your preferences. I add a new material open up the UV. And add a new image texture node. I also make copies of the original UV maps just so I have backups. Under the UV image editor, I make sure I have the barrel open. In the menu, I go to Image, Edit Externally. This will open the UV in my image editor. I lock the UV layer so I don't accidentally paint over it. I add a new paint layer below the UV. Just as a point of reference for those following along, the top two UV islands are the metal pieces on the side of the barrel. Everything else is wood. This isn't a tutorial on how to use Krita. I'll leave some links below that are beginner friendly. I use the brushes to add color and interest to the UVs. The first thing I do is add a dark gray color with a hint of blue to the metal pieces. I want to add a light gray to the outer edge of the metal, since this is where the metal will be rubbed against most, producing edge wear. If I don't know exactly where the edges are, I can quickly find out in Blender. I turn on the UV sync selection and choose edge mode. When I select the edges that I need, I see them turn orange on the UV. Back in Krita, I now know where on the UV map to paint the lighter gray color. If I want to see my progress so far, I export the UV. In Blender, I then use Alt-R while in the UV viewport to update the image. I continue to work on the metal, adding texture and highlights. I then continue working on the wood. When I'm done, I hide the background and export the final UV as a JPEG. For the roughness map, I open the original UV in Krita and add a white color to all the wood pieces. I then hide the background and save the UV map. I then hide the white for the wood and add a white color for the metal parts. I then hide the background and save the UV map. Back in Blender, I add a new image texture and open the roughness map. Changing the color space to non-color and connecting it to the roughness of the BSDF shader. I make a new material for the metal parts of the barrel. And assign them to the metal straps. Add a new image texture and open the diffuse, connecting it to the base color. I duplicate the texture node and open up the metallic map. Changing the color space to non-color data. I change the roughness to around 0.7 and the metallic to 1. Connecting the metallic map to the metallic of the BSDF shader. If you have a request for a tutorial, a question, or a comment, feel free to leave a comment below the video. If you're interested in learning more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.